Welcome to Debt Matters, the program dedicated to helping you optimize your financial ecosystem. Today, we're focusing squarely on a matter that really it defines business stability, B2B debt collection, that delicate yet absolutely vital process of securing the money owed to one business by another.
It's where the theory really meets reality, isn't it? When we look at how businesses recover their capital, the stakes are just.
Hmm.
They're so high.
hmm
We're not talking about small consumer debts here. These involve substantial contracts, potentially huge sums of money, and this is critical, professional reputations.
Right.
A mistake in this area can create a kind of double jeopardy. It costs you your current cash flow, and at the same time, it can destroy future opportunities.
Exactly. You shared a really comprehensive body of research on this, and our mission today is to analyze the tactics, the methods that have been shared recently. We want to pull out the practical knowledge you need so you can understand how to dramatically improve cash flow and streamline your operations. And all of that while hopefully trying to preserve a workable relationship with your clients.
And for so many businesses, managing accounts receivable is, it's the clearest indicator of their financial health. But it's so often just relegated to this reactive, almost panicked function.
Yeah, firefighting mode.
Exactly. So today we're going to reorganize this whole process into a clear four-part roadmap of best practices. And we're going to start long before an invoice is even overdue and then move all the way through to, appropriate legal escalation. This whole thing demands a proactive infrastructure.
Okay, so let's unpack that starting point because the absolute best collection strategy has to be prevention, right? If you set the stage correctly from the get-go, a lot of these collection issues they disappear. The number one item we have to talk about is defining payment terms clearly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Clarity is the bedrock of commercial trust. But just, writing net 30 on an invoice it's just not enough in modern B2B transactions.
So it's more than just a line item.
Oh, much more. When we look at what works, defining terms clearly means those terms are written, they're mutually agreed upon, and they are fully integrated into the foundational legal documents.
Foundational. You mean like the master service agreement?
Exactly. The MSA, the statement of work, the overarching contract, whatever that core document is.
So it's not a suggestion, it's a contractual command. What elements, beyond just the due date, need to be spelled out in those legal instruments?
Well, you need zero ambiguity on three fronts. First, the precise due date and what triggers it. Is it net 30? From the invoice date, the delivery date, the date of service, acceptance. You'd be surprised how often that's vague. Second, the accepted methods of payment have to be laid out. Wire transfers, ACH, check. And if there are any service fees tied to certain methods, that has to be clear.
And the third, you said three fronts.
The third, and this is probably the most crucial for making it all stick, is establishing a clear process for dispute resolution before payment becomes an issue. So if they dispute the quality of the service, the contract needs to state exactly how that dispute is handled and, critically, whether it legally permits them to withhold payment while it's being sorted out.
But that brings up a point about the sales cycle, though. Doesn't embedding all of these, legally dense payment clauses, doesn't that slow down the signing process? Is there a risk of prioritizing certainty over just getting the deal done?
That's the constant tension, isn't it, in business development? But look, the momentary delay caused by confirming clear terms, it pales in comparison to the financial black hole of trying to recover, say, $50,000 without a clear contract.
Right.
You're not really slowing down the process. You're de-risking the entire transaction. The sales team has to understand that they're not truly successful until the cash is in the bank, not just when the contract is signed. Hashtag tagged 1.1 defining and monitoring payment terms. And it goes beyond just defining the terms. The most successful collection departments, they embed robust ways of reviewing compliance. This monitoring is like your financial gyroscope. It tells you immediately if you're drifting off course.
Okay, so what metrics should a business actually be using to monitor that compliance effectively?
Well, the primary metric everyone knows is days sales outstanding, or DSO. But you have to segment that. You can't just look at the overall number.
Segment how?
You should be tracking the average days late for each client. So if client A has a net 30 term, but they average, say, 35 days to pay, that 5-day drift is a signal. A really robust system tracks not just how old the debt is, but which customers, maybe which industries, or even which specific products tend to generate overdue invoices.
And what do you do with that data? Is it just for, classifying clients, or does it actually prompt some kind of action?
It has to prompt proactive action. If your data shows a customer is consistently paying late, you don't wait until they're 90 days past due.
You get ahead of it.
You get ahead of it. You adjust their credit limits now. You might shift them to requiring a larger upfront deposit for the next job, or maybe move them from net 30 to net 15 terms for future orders. It becomes a commercial negotiation based on quantifiable risk, not emotion. And that's what prevents a manageable 5-day delay from metastasizing into an uncollectible 120-day default.
Let's talk about the controversial element in payment terms.
Mm.
Late fees. Businesses are often really hesitant to implement them. They worry about souring a relationship, especially with a major client. Is this sort of financial politeness ultimately just costing businesses money?
It absolutely is. And this hesitancy is.
Yeah.
It's a costly form of self-sabotage. Late fees are a critical component of any comprehensive B2B payment strategy. They serve these twin vital functions that have to be communicated with absolute transparency.
Okay, let's focus on that first function, motivation. How effective are late fees, really, at encouraging timely payment in a corporate setting?
They provide a clear financial incentive. Think about it. When a finance department is sitting there prioritizing which invoices to pay, the one that is accruing a 1 or 1.5% penalty every month,
That one moves up the stack?
it moves higher up the stack than the one that has no penalty. Of course it does. It turns your invoice from just a passive liability on their books into an actively growing cost for them.
And what about the second function? You said compensation for the creditor. What exactly are we compensating for when a client pays late?
You're compensating for your cost of capital. When payment is delayed, you are, in effect, extending an unplanned, unauthorized, unsecured loan to your client.
Right, I never thought of it that way. It's an unsecured loan.
That's exactly what it is. And that loan has to cover your own operational costs, the administrative costs of chasing the debt, and the time value of money, including inflation. The late fee makes the client financially responsible for holding onto your capital. If you don't charge that fee, your timely paying customers are effectively subsidizing the late payers, which is just fundamentally unfair.
Okay, so for the business owner or finance professional listening right now, what kind of rates are we talking about here? And how should they be structured so they hold up?
Well, the specifics can depend heavily on jurisdiction, because many regions have statutory maximums. You can't charge usurious rates. But in commercial settings, a common legally defensible structure involves a percentage rate, often ranging from, say, 1 to 1.5% per month. That's about 12 to 18% APR. Sometimes a fixed administrative charge is added on top.
And if we choose a percentage, should that be simple interest or compounding? And how do you clearly define how it accrues?
To avoid any claims of overreach, most commercial agreements stipulate simple monthly interest, and it's applied to the overdue principal balance, typically calculated from the day right after the term expires. But the most important thing is that the exact calculation method, the rate, and the date the fee starts accruing must be explicitly stated in that initial contract. Upfront, if you try to spring a fee on a client after the fact you're just inviting a dispute, you'll damage goodwill irreparably, and you might even forfeit your legal ability to collect that fee at all. Transparency from day one validates the fee as a standard cost of delayed business. Hashtag 1.2, the power of thorough documentation.
Okay, so moving on from the terms themselves, we get to the second preparation tip, meticulous documentation. If the situation ever progresses from just a simple accounting question to a serious collection issue, evidence becomes everything. Why do businesses need to go beyond just filing away the invoice?
Because collection or arbitration or, God forbid, litigation, it all hinges on establishing an undeniable chronological chain of facts. We can't rely on memory or some implicit understanding. We're building a fortress of proof. This detailed record is the foundation that any successful recovery case rests on, and without it, even a totally legitimate debt can become worthless.
Let's get really specific about those required records. What comprises this fortress of proof that you're talking about?
It's threefold. First, the contractual basis. That's all the original agreements, service level agreements, SLAs, purchase orders, change orders. Anything that was signed or digitally confirmed that establishes the debtor's commitment and their acceptance of the terms. Second is the financial record. And that means copies of every single invoice, every detailed statement of account that shows the running balance, the date any payments were received, and the calculation and application of those late fees we just talked about.
And the third element, which I imagine is often the most difficult one to maintain.
It is. That's the proof of performance and communication log. This is where so many businesses fail. You need documentation that proves you actually delivered the goods or you rendered the service you contracted for.
What does that look like? A delivery receipt.
It could be a delivery receipt signed by the receiving department, a formal client sign-off on a project completion, or maybe server logs showing a software delivery. The point is, the debtor has to be satisfied with the service delivered before the full payment obligation is triggered. If you can't prove you performed, they have a legitimate counterclaim.
And that communication log itself, I mean, that sounds incredibly demanding.
It is demanding, but it's non-negotiable. You need a running log of every single interaction related to that debt. For every phone call, every email, every text message, every meeting, you have to record the date, the time, the method, the names of the people involved, and a concise summary of the conversation.
So even a promise.
Especially a promise. If the client makes a promise like, we will process the wire transfer on Friday, that has to be logged. If they raise a dispute, the shipment was short by 2 pallets, that also has to be logged immediately.
Okay, for electronic communication like emails, is just saving the email body enough? Or do we need to get more technical?
You absolutely need the technical metadata, especially if this thing becomes legally contested. The body of the email proves what was said, sure. But the header information, including the server timestamps and the routing details, that proves when it was sent, when it was received by the debtor's server, and it confirms it wasn't fraudulently created. A lawyer relying just on a printed email body is starting a fight with one hand tied behind their back.
Let's dig into the legal implications here. You mentioned this level of detail is necessary to shift the burden of proof. Can you elaborate on that concept for us?
Of course. In a collection scenario, especially if you get to litigation or serious arbitration, the creditor, that's you, initially bears the burden of proving the debt is owed and that you made reasonable attempts to collect. Continuous, accessible, chronological documentation achieves this efficiently. It proves the contracts are valid, the service was delivered, and the debtor was formally and repeatedly notified of their obligation. Once you've established that, the burden shifts entirely to the debtor. They then have to prove why they haven't paid. They have to contest the contract, or the delivery, or your attempts at collection. If your documentation is flawless, the debtor's only real recourse is to delay, which a good attorney can usually shut down pretty quickly.
So, poor documentation doesn't just make collection harder. It actually provides the debtor with legal loopholes they can use to avoid peaking.
Precisely. We've heard of cases where substantial debts were just lost because the only record of an agreement or a payment promise was, a handwritten note or some casual text message that lacked the verifiable context and metadata you need for court. Here's the test. If you suddenly had to hand over your 3 largest outstanding invoices to an attorney tomorrow, they shouldn't have to spend 2 weeks chasing down scattered emails and notes. It should be a single, digitally organized, evidence-based file. That is the true test of preparation.
Okay, so we've established the foundation, clear terms, and flawless documentation. Now, let's move into the scenario where those terms are breached. Let's say net 30 is now day 35. Immediate, nuanced action is required. We're transitioning to active collection strategies, and this starts with understanding that just relying on one reminder method is not going to be enough. The guidance really emphasizes using diverse communication methods.
That's right. Once that due date passes, you're moving out of passive accounting oversight and into active relationship management under financial duress.
That's a great way to put it.
The objective shifts from passively waiting for payment to actively seeking the reason for non-payment. Just using automated emails, for instance, is the quickest way to be ignored or just filtered into a spam folder, particularly within these large corporate accounting departments.
So let's start with direct contact. Why is a phone call often so much better than written communication in those early stages of delinquency?
The phone call introduces the human element, and that is the necessary catalyst for progress. It's just significantly more difficult for a corporate representative to ignore a live person on the phone than it is to just delete a generic email.
Sure.
But that first phone call, which should happen ideally within, say, 1 to 5 days of the missed deadline, it has to be framed not as a confrontation, but as a confirmation and an intelligence-gathering exercise.
What should the objective, or I guess the script, of that initial phone call look like?
The objective is really simple. Confirm they got the invoice and uncover the true reason for non-payment. The conversation should sound professional and concerned. Something like, "Hi, we noticed that payment for invoice X wasn't processed yesterday. Can you help me understand if this is just an internal administrative delay, or is there maybe a hold on payment because of a service query?"
And that distinction is vital. An administrative bottleneck versus a service dispute. Why does knowing the difference change your whole strategy?
Well, if it's an administrative bottleneck, which is the usual case in the early days, it often just means they need the invoice routed to the right approver or they missed a deadline. You just need to find the correct contact and politely confirm a new payment date.
Simple enough.
But if it's a service dispute, you have to immediately involve your account manager or the project lead to address the underlying complaint. Because until that core issue is resolved, they have a legitimate reason to delay payment.
Right.
If you just keep demanding payment without resolving the dispute, you are just escalating the conflict for no reason. And another thing, phone calls are crucial for identifying the true decision maker. Often, the AR clerk you're calling is just waiting for internal approval.
So they're not the one who can actually solve the problem.
Exactly. A persistent and polite phone strategy is often what's necessary to escalate the conversation internally within their organization, moving from the accounts payable department up to the actual financial controller or even the CFO, depending on how big the debt is.
So how do written methods like email and registered letters, how do they complement this direct verbal contact?
They provide the essential paper trail and the necessary formality. Emails are mandatory for immediate follow-up.
So after every call.
After every call, if you have a call and the debtor promises payment by Friday, you must send an immediate confirmation email. Something like, following our conversation today, we confirm receipt of full payment of the amount is expected by close of business this Friday, date. This converts a verbal, potentially deniable promise into a documented, time-stamped commitment.
Okay, let's escalate the formality a bit. The use of a registered letter. That seems like a really clear step toward external action. When should you deploy that?
The registered letter should be reserved for the moment the debt crosses a critical internal threshold, typically between 45 and 60 days past due, or immediately after a verbal payment promise is broken. Its function isn't conversational, it's purely legal and formal. It provides irrefutable legal proof that the debtor received official notification of the outstanding balance, the accruing fees, and crucially, the specific consequences of continued non-payment. And often this registered letter is structured as what's called a letter before action, or LBA. It clearly informs the debtor that if payment isn't received by a specific short deadline, say 7 or 14 days, the creditor reserves the right to engage a collection agency or start legal proceedings without any further notice.
So it's the final warning.
It is. And sending an LBA is a crucial procedural step that's often legally required before you can even seek court intervention in many jurisdictions.
Given that we're talking B2B here, personalization is still a core requirement, even in formal collection. How do we make sure our communication avoids sounding like some mass-produced dunning notice?
That is the defining factor that separates good B2B collections from, say, consumer collections. You have to avoid that generic form letter trap. Personalization signals respect. This means making sure the person making the call or sending the letter is knowledgeable about the account history. They should be able to reference previous purchase orders, maybe acknowledge previous positive relationship history, and speak intelligently about the underlying contract. The tone has to be professional, firm, but reasonable. The message is, we value our business relationship, but this is an overdue commercial obligation that has to be settled immediately. #TAG 2.2, offering constructive solutions through payment plans.
That focus on being reasonable leads us to the next concept, which is flexibility. Sometimes, even historically great customers face a temporary financial crunch. This suggests there's a strategic need to offer structured payment plans.
Flexibility is a powerful tactical tool, but, and this is a big but, it has to be deployed with extreme caution and rigor. It should never be seen as weakness.
So what are the specific criteria a creditor should apply before they even agree to a payment plan? When does this flexibility just become, delaying the inevitable?
The criteria have to be exceptionally strict. Payment plans should generally be reserved only for good, long-standing customers who can demonstrate they're having a genuine temporary hardship. Maybe they lost a major contract, or they're waiting on a large receivable themselves.
And they have to be talking to you.
Critically, yes. They have to be proactively communicating and showing a willingness to comply. If the debtor is silent, consistently avoids contact, or has a history of breaking smaller promises, a payment plan is irrelevant. They require immediate escalation. Offering a plan to a chronic defaulter just prolongs your internal administrative costs. The moment you agree to a payment plan, you're essentially accepting a reduction in certainty in exchange for an increased likelihood of recovery. You need verifiable evidence of good faith and their financial ability to actually meet the new terms.
So once you make that decision to offer a plan, how must it be structured to fully protect the creditor and avoid just opening the door to endless delays?
Structure is everything. The plan has to be formalized in a detailed written agreement that is signed by both parties. This is usually called a novation agreement. which means it supersedes the original payment terms for this specific debt and establishes a new legal commitment.
What kind of details have to be in that formal agreement?
First, clear installments, the exact dollar amount due on fixed, non-negotiable deadlines. Second, it has to explicitly state that the debtor acknowledges the total undisputed debt amount, including all the late fees that have accrued up to that date. This removes any future grounds for dispute over the principal.
And what else?
Third, and this is probably the most vital part, it must include a severe default clause. This clause has to stipulate that if the debtor misses even one installment, the entire original balance, plus all pre-existing and newly accrued fees, immediately becomes due and payable. This can trigger an immediate referral to a collection agency or legal action. It formalizes the high stakes of the plan and gives the creditor a clear, documented trigger for instant escalation if they fail.
That documentation really seems to turn the payment plan from, a gentle extension into a structured, enforceable commitment.
Precisely. It's a lifeline for the client, but it's a tight leash for the creditor. And I'll add, for very large debts, a creditor should consider asking for a personal guarantee from one of the principals of the debtor company, or maybe even collateral, though that requires a high degree of legal sophistication.
Let's just consider the pragmatic benefit to the creditor here. If we insist on the full amount immediately, we might scare off the debtor, forcing us into litigation. What is the ultimate financial argument for accepting a staggered recovery?
The cost analysis usually favors the structured plan. I mean, recovering 100% of the principal over 6 months via installments with zero litigation costs is almost always financially better than chasing 100% recovery through the courts for 18 months, incurring substantial legal fees, and facing the uncertainty of ever enforcing a judgment.
That makes sense.
Litigation is a cost center. A payment plan is a controlled revenue stream. The goal of collection isn't punishment, it's maximum recovery with minimum expense. And a successfully completed plan not only recovers the capital, but can potentially salvage the client relationship, allowing for continued business once their financial footing stabilizes.
We've talked about preparation and manual collection efforts. Now we have to address the reality of scale. In the modern B2B world, relying solely on manual effort when you're handling hundreds of accounts it's just inefficient and it's prone to failure. We have to shift focus to leveraging systems for efficiency and oversight using technology.
This is the inflection point where operational stability is either maintained or lost. If a business is managing complex B2B accounts using, say, spreadsheets and calendar reminders, they're introducing monumental human error and sacrificing recovery rates. Modern debt collection software is. It's no longer a luxury. It's an essential part of the financial infrastructure.
The core of this transition, then, is leveraging specialized debt collection software. Let's break down the specific capabilities these tools offer that really streamline the process.
Okay, the foundational capability is the automatic tracking and aging of accounts. The software continuously calculates and visualizes the debt age 30, 60, 90, 120 days past due using the payment terms you've defined.
How does that go beyond just a simple accounting report that I could pull?
It creates customizable dashboards and heat maps of risk. A standard report just tells you how old the debt is. The software tells you which debts are aging the fastest, which specific account managers have the highest percentage of overdue receivables, and it flags accounts that cross critical thresholds automatically. This eliminates the possibility that a debt will silently slip from 45 days past due to 120 days just because an employee missed a row on a spreadsheet. It institutes a kind of continuous vigilance. Then, building on that tracking, the second crucial function is automation, specifically for communication sequences.
We've established that communication has to be timely and varied. How does technology manage that complex cadence consistently?
The software manages the sequence and the tone based on how far past due an account is. For example, you can program it to send a polite, automated email reminder 5 days before the due date.
Proactive.
Exactly. Then, the day after the deadline, it sends a firmer internal notice to the sales rep and a confirmation email to the client. At 30 days past due, it queues up a task for a human representative to make a personalized phone call, and at the same time generates a formal email with that letter before action language we talked about. This ensures perfect consistency and timing. The sequence is defined, the tone is managed, and it removes the subjectivity and error that's just inherent in manual follow-up. And crucially, these automated reminders often prompt payment before human intervention is even necessary, which saves substantial labor cost.
But if we're dealing with complex B2B relationships, how does technology handle the unique disputes or the complexities of individual accounts?
This leads to the critical component of integration and centralized data. The collection software has to integrate seamlessly with the company's enterprise resource planning or ERP systems, like an SAP or a NetSuite, and often the customer relationship management, the CRM system, like Salesforce.
And why is that integration so vital?
Because it ensures that the collection team is working with real-time, accurate data. A central platform houses not only the invoice and the payment history, but also the contracts, the communication logs, which get pulled automatically from synced emails, and crucially, any dispute flags.
Oh, that's smart.
It is. So if a sales rep logs a service complaint in the CRM, the collection software immediately flags that account, and that prevents the automated system from sending aggressive payment demands before the service issue is resolved. This centralized approach simplifies the internal workflow immensely. Every employee who engages with that debt has instant, complete context. The account manager, the finance clerk, the escalation officer, they all see the same verified chronological history.
That addresses internal efficiency. But let's talk about a more advanced capability, predictive modeling and debtor scoring. How does technology enhance the strategic decision-making process?
Okay, so this moves collection from just reactive chasing to proactive strategy. Advanced software can use machine learning to assign a risk score to each debtor. And that's based on their payment history, industry trends, external financial data if it's available, and their past responsiveness to collection efforts.
So it's not just reporting what happened in the past, it's predicting future behavior.
Exactly. And this allows for intelligent debtor segmentation. Instead of treating all debts over 60 days the same, the system might flag a high-value, low-risk debtor with just a gentle automated reminder, while immediately escalating a medium-value, high-risk debtor, someone with a history of slow payment and broken promises, for immediate personal contact and maybe even early external referral. It focuses your highly compensated human staff on the accounts where their intervention will have the maximum impact on recovery. And that kind of prioritization is impossible to do manually at scale.
So if a business implements this kind of technology, what's the ultimate value proposition, the ROI beyond just recovering a few more invoices?
The ROI is measured in several dimensions. You have reduced risk exposure, a faster cash conversion cycle, so lower DSO, and vast labor cost savings. By reducing human error and automating routine communication, the technology frees up your skilled accounts receivable personnel. They can stop just generating reminders and start focusing on complex negotiations, handling disputes, or performing the necessary due diligence required for a legal handover. These are activities that genuinely require human judgment and skill. The system handles the simple, volume-based administrative tasks, allowing your staff to focus on the truly strategic recovery efforts.
All right, so we've prepared, we've actively communicated, and we've deployed technology for maximum efficiency. Yet sometimes, despite all of those best practices, the debt remains outstanding. This brings us to the most uncomfortable but necessary transition, recognizing when your internal efforts have reached their limit and external assistance is required.
This is a financially and procedurally important transition. Businesses often fall into the trap of, throwing good money after bad, spending internal administrative hours chasing a debt that is already essentially uncollectible without third-party intervention. You need objective, predefined criteria to stop that internal chasing.
So what are the clearest signs that internal collection efforts are just unlikely to succeed and that it's time to consider legal action or involving a professional collection agency?
The signs are usually behavioral and temporal. The first is simply time elapsed. Most businesses should set an absolute internal deadline, often around 90 to 120 days past the original due date. Beyond this point, recovery rates drop precipitously, and the debt needs professional intervention to prevent it from becoming a total loss. The second is communication failure. This is when all your contact attempts, phone, email, registered letters, are just met with absolute prolonged silence. When the debtor refuses to engage, it shows a profound lack of willingness or ability to pay.
And what about when they do talk, but they just make false promises?
That's the third and often the most telling sign. Broken commitments. If a client commits to 2 different payment dates and misses both of them, or if they formally agree to a payment plan and then default on the very first installment, it's a clear indicator that internal negotiation is futile. They're just using delay tactics. And you need the leverage of a third party to break that cycle. And the fourth sign is the escalation of dispute behavior. If the debtor suddenly starts disputing facts that were previously agreed upon, like challenging the contract's validity or the service delivery after 90 days of silence, It signals they are actively seeking legal justification for non-payment. The matter has moved beyond a simple financial issue into a legal dispute that requires expert handling.
So the threshold isn't just time, but it's the qualitative nature of their engagement and the realization that the administrative cost of chasing this debt internally is now exceeding the potential for a successful recovery.
Exactly. You have to quantify that administrative burden. Once you determine that your highly paid finance team is spending more hours on a low probability recovery than the percentage fee a collection agency would charge, it's time to outsource the risk and the effort. Hashtag tag 4.2. Choosing the right debt collection agency.
So once that decision to escalate is made, selecting the right external partner is paramount. This partner becomes an extension of your finance department, and their actions are going to directly reflect on your brand's reputation.
Vetting a collection agency requires the same rigor you'd apply to hiring a crucial executive. Their specialization, their methodology, their ethics, they all have to align with your corporate values and, just as importantly, the commercial environment you operate in.
Let's start with specialization. Why is B2B specialization so crucial when you're vetting a collection agency? Can't you just hire a consumer debt collector who's known for being tough?
Absolutely not. Consumer and B2B collections are governed by entirely different legal frameworks. A consumer agency deals primarily with individuals, and they often use tactics that are simply unacceptable and, frankly, frequently illegal in a corporate environment.
I see.
A B2B specialized agency understands the nuances of commercial law, corporate bankruptcy procedures, and, most importantly, they know how to engage in sophisticated negotiation with corporate financial officers. They focus on recovery through leverage and professional negotiation, not aggressive personal pressure.
What about industry experience? If my debt is in, say, the construction industry, should I be looking for a collection agency that specializes in construction?
Industry experience provides critical context. A B2B agency that specializes in the logistics or construction sector, for example, understands the common payment cycles, the specific types of contractual disputes you see there, like retainage issues or material shortages, and the regulatory environment. They speak the jargon, they can anticipate the common defense mechanisms, and they can much more swiftly pinpoint the leverage points you need for a faster resolution. They aren't learning your industry on your time.
We have to address reputation and ethics. And not in a preachy way, but purely from a risk management perspective. How do you assess if an agency operates with the necessary integrity before you hand over sensitive client relationships to them?
This is pure due diligence. You are hiring them to act on your behalf, so any unprofessional or legally questionable actions they take will damage your standing, regardless of who recovers the cash. You have to check their references, speak to other corporate clients they serve, review complaints with regulatory bodies, and understand their process. You need to guarantee that their methods are professional and compliant with all the relevant commercial collection laws. An agency that relies on coercion or dubious threats is not worth the short-term recovery because the long-term reputation damage will cost you far more.
Okay, finally, let's talk about the practical considerations, success rates and fees.
These two factors have to be analyzed together. A high success rate on easy, low-value debts is irrelevant if your debt is complex and high value. You need to assess their track record specifically with debt profiles that are similar to yours. Similar size, age, complexity, and industry.
And how should the fee structure be scrutinized?
Well, most B2B agencies use a contingency fee structure, which is good. They only get paid if they successfully recover funds for you. That aligns your incentives. However, the fee has to be clearly tiered. A collection effort that only requires a few phone calls and a formal demand letter, that's pre-litigation, should warrant a lower contingency percentage than a debt that requires months of legal prep and actually filing a lawsuit, which is the litigation phase.
So you need to know where those lines are.
You have to. Make sure the agency is completely transparent about when their percentage increases and that you retain control over the decision to enter that litigation phase because that commitment is often irrevocable and very costly. You also need clarity on what they charge for, especially if no money is recovered. Are there filing fees, administrative costs, legal prep costs, even if the collection fails? A good B2B agency should have an incentive structure that minimizes your outlay until cash is in your hand.
So the selection process is really about finding a specialized, ethical proxy who can apply leverage and commercial legal knowledge without damaging the credibility your business has spent years building.
Precisely. It is the final, calculated step toward maximum recovery while minimizing brand risk and internal resource depletion. Hashtag NevITRA.
This analysis has given us a really complete picture of B2B collections, moving from the earliest stage of contract prep all the way through to that reluctant, structured escalation. We've covered four critical pillars for optimizing your cash flow. First, setting crystal clear terms and documenting absolutely everything is the non-negotiable foundation for legal readiness.
Second, using diverse, personalized communication methods, prioritizing the phone call for intelligence gathering, while strategically offering flexibility through highly structured payment plans. This ensures you retain control while maximizing your chances of recovery.
Third, leveraging technology, specifically collection software, is essential for efficiency. This allows you to automatically track risk, manage customized communication sequences, and make sure all your crucial data is centralized for quick access and strategic prioritization.
And fourth, knowing precisely when to stop internal efforts based on clear behavioral and temporal criteria, and then carefully choosing an ethical, specialized external partner to apply the necessary commercial leverage without compromising your reputation.
That brings us to our final thought. We spent this time analyzing how to prepare for and execute collection efforts successfully, but the ultimate metric of a truly effective accounts receivable department is its ongoing readiness.
So ask yourself this: how easily could you implement a system to automatically flag and route customer disputes the moment they appear in your sales or project management software? If you rely on staff to manually check two different systems, you have a friction point, and that friction point is delaying resolution, which in turn delays payment. Optimized B2B collection isn't just about chasing old money, it's about eliminating all unnecessary friction in the payment cycle, from the moment the service is delivered to the moment cash settles in your bank account. That continuous refinement, that's the true marker of operational excellence.